Testing? Testing? Hello, welcome to the video. Here we're looking at a histogram, and it's showing us the results of counts that were done on Chips Ahoy chocolate chip cookies, bags of cookies. They took 42 different bags of cookies and counted the number of chips in each bag of cookie. And so we can see the results ranged from somewhere a little over 1,000 to up in the 1,500s up here. And we want to look at some qualitative factors of our histogram here. So the first thing we're asked about, which term applies to this histogram, right skewed, symmetric, or left skewed? So these are some very important vocab terms that we'll see throughout the quarter, so it's good to take some time and practice with those. So if we're going to call a histogram right skewed, what that means is the histogram has a long tail going out to the right. So most of the values would be on the left. So in general, if we draw a picture of a density curve, you know, a kind of a approximation of what it would look like, something that's right skewed has most of the values on the left, but there's that long trail tailing off to the right where we wouldn't have expected to see as many values. So right skewed means there's a tail on the right. A symmetric distribution, let me use a different color so we can see clearly. A symmetric distribution can have any number of shapes. It might look kind of like a bell shape. We'll see a lot of those as we go throughout the quarter. So both sides would be the same. That's a rough sketch of something symmetric. It might be flat, like that. It could even, I suppose, be what we call bimodal, which is it has two peaks, but the peaks are pretty symmetric with a trough in the middle. So any of those would be symmetric distributions. And then left skewed is just the same idea as right skewed, but the tail is on the other side. So there's a long tail on the left, and then most of the data values on the right. So there's a tail on the left. So if we look at this distribution, if we imagine kind of sketching a density curve over it, we would see that most of the peaks are here on the left, but there appears to be a tail on the right with no matching tail on this side. So we would describe this distribution as right skewed. All right, moving on to part 2. Which measure of center is most appropriate for this data? So we've got the median and the mean. One thing you should have learned in your reading or your videos or your class for this chapter is whenever we're looking at a distribution, if the distribution is skewed, the mean will be very influenced by that skewness. The mean will be exaggerated in the direction of the skew, but the median is more robust. It's resistant to skewness. So if we have a skewed data set, the median is more appropriate. So we'll say this is more appropriate for skewed data sets. When we say more appropriate, what do I mean? I mean the median is going to do a better job of capturing the overall pattern of the data if the data is skewed. So anytime in your analysis, if you have skewed data, keep in mind the median is going to be a very good choice. It's also interesting to look at the mean, but the mean might be influenced by those outliers or by the skewness and not give us accurate representation of the overall patterns in the data, or the overall center of the data. And finally, they're asking which measure of spread is most appropriate for the data. So if we think about the range and the IQR, these are kind of like the median. They're telling us rankings, whereas the standard deviation is usually used in conjunction with the mean. So the standard deviation is best if the data is not skewed. The IQR includes, the IQR is the interquartile range, so that's going to tell us how far between the 25th and the 70th percentile. That's a great measure of spread for when your data is skewed. So this is also good for skewed data. Standard deviation is better for symmetric data. The range is a very rough estimate of spread, and it's not as precise as the IQR. It's influenced by just the biggest and the smallest. So that's also going to be pulled out if there's outliers. So I would say the IQR there is really your best choice if you're dealing with skewed data.